time comes, time for you to sleep, you can't sleep. You know, every single minute it hits me, and we'll have a breakdown. I mean, it's just that things of these will stay in our life. The rest of our lives.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Maggie, what about you?
Yes, let me tell you, this is like a second life for me. My parents, I'm telling you, they've been very supportive, because I've also was here for the 1993 bombing, and I've overcome that fear, and to think that this has happened again and I had to relive this is very, how would you say, I can't think of it in English. I can only think of it in Spanish.
I don't think that there are words that can describe this.
No, it's worse than the word fear or terrified. It's worse than that. You can't describe it.
Amy, let me ask you this. If you had something to say to the perpetrators of this tragedy, of this terrorist act, again, this just, it's beyond words to describe this act, but what would you tell the perpetrators of this act?
I would say that how can a human being with feelings and emotion can do such a thing, you know, to hurt more people? I just don't understand it. I just don't understand.
Amy Lowe, Maggie Rivera, thank you so much to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jim.
Really, it's amazing accounts, and as these personal accounts, as these words, people struggling even to find words, echo around the world and media coverage. When you see these things like this, you understand why international support for a military response at the same time as building one of the United States' firmest backers is Britain. Just a short while ago, Prime Minister Tony Blair told CNN's Christiane Amanpour that the world was at war with terrorism.
I'm very pleased at the way that America and the American administration has gone out of its way to consult its allies, to keep us fully informed so that we are part of the deliberations they're making. But we have to do two things, in my view. First of all, there has to be a response to bring those terrorists who committed this attack to account, and we will play our full part in that. And secondly, there has then to be an agenda that we construct at an international level that involves the whole of the international community in dismantling the machinery of international terrorism, how it's financed, how these people move about the world, the countries that then harbour them and give them help. At every single level, we have to pursue and dismantle this machinery of terror. And that is important, not just for the purpose of bringing those people to account, but also in order to make sure that this does not happen again. Well, we've made it very clear that we stand side by side with the United States. And it's not a question of the United States simply saying, this is what we're going to do now, come and join us. The US is in close consultation with us and with other allies, and I think there will be a very broad support for a response that allows us to pursue and bring to account those responsible for this act, and do it as an act of justice. It's fairly clear where the evidence is tending, but I think it is important that we consider the evidence in a very careful way, that it's factually based, that we are hard-headed about it, but once we have come to a conclusion, then it is important that we hold those people who are responsible for this, as I say, to account. And I think you will find, incidentally, that that is the view right round the world. I've spoken to Arab leaders in the past few days that have expressed their outrage at what has happened, their determination that this should be seen as something that the world of Islam is standing against, not merely countries like America and the United Kingdom. And I think you will find that there is enormous support for the idea that we must put together a broad-based coalition that hound these people down and that bring them to account, and do it, as I say, for reasons of justice. We owe it to those people that lost their lives, to their families who are grieving, and to our own defence of democracy and liberty and freedom.
That was British Prime Minister Tony Blair. In Russia, the memory of terrorist bombings in Moscow and other cities 2 years ago heightens sympathy for the victims of Tuesday's attacks, but Russian officials are saying they've been warning against such attacks for some time now. Jill Doherty has a story.
Russia is telling the West, we tried to tell you. Terror in the United States or terror in Russia. It's all controlled by international terrorist organizations, they say. The #1 criminal suspect in both countries, Osama bin Laden. The FSB, successor to the KGB, tells CNN it knew where bin Laden was hiding before the attacks on the U.S. and informed other special services. He's since changed his location, the FSB says, but is still in Afghanistan. And the agency vows to find out where he is and inform its Western colleagues.
Russia has never tried to kill Osama bin Laden. We usually deal with infiltrating criminals, arresting them, and turning them over to the courts to be punished. That's what I think should be done. However, we have experience where, when a suspect offers arms resistance, in order to avoid casualties, it is possible to kill him.
President Vladimir Putin says he's been warning the West since he took office that there is a worldwide network of fanatical terrorists funded primarily by drug money. They're fighting in Chechnya, he claims, and are responsible for a wave of apartment house bombings that hit Russia 2 years ago. But the West, Moscow says, spent too much time scolding Russia for how it dealt with the threat.
I think now they understand that it is not just our internal issue. It's a problem for the entire international community.
Evil must be punished, says the Russian president.
But we should not become like bandits that act from behind a corner. We should consider our decisions and proceed from true facts.
The attacks in the United States, he says, could be compared in scale and cruelty to what the Nazis were perpetrating. I feel guilty for what has happened, Vladimir Putin says. We spoke so much about this threat, but apparently not enough. Jill Doherty, CNN, Moscow.
People from all over the world are expressing their sympathy and their support. That includes the Middle East. Thousands of Israelis took part in rallies in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. Israeli Foreign Minister Shimon Peres telling the crowd in Tel Aviv the U.S. leads the struggle for freedom, for security, and for humanity. Kuwaitis gathered at blood banks to donate blood for the victims of the attacks. Donors say they want to show their gratitude for U.S. involvement in the Gulf War after Iraq's invasion in 1990. Egyptian Foreign Minister Ahmed Maher signed a book of condolences at the U.S. Embassy in Cairo. After that ceremony, the Egyptian official urged the world community to hold an international conference against terrorism. Meantime, in Britain, soccer players observed a minute of silence and wore black armbands on the field as a sign of mourning.
Iraq's leader Saddam Hussein has issued his first full statement regarding the terror attacks. Rula Amin has more from Baghdad.
Iraq's President Saddam Hussein, in a message to the American people, appealed for serenity.
America needs wisdom, not power. It has used power along with the West to the extreme extent, only to find out later that it doesn't achieve what they wanted. Will the rulers of America try wisdom just for once so that their people can live in security and stability?
The tone of this letter, read on state television, more muted than his first reaction. The day after Tuesday's attacks, he had said, despite the conflicting human feelings, what happened was a result of America's foreign policy, if the attackers were indeed not Americans, he said. And he pointedly did not condemn the attacks. He's still not condemning them. But this time, he called the attacks evil inflicted on America and called for restraint. He also referred to the harassment of Arab Americans and American Muslims in the United States. He said that despite the pain he says Arabs and Muslims have suffered from the United States, he says they never harassed Westerners who walked in the streets of Baghdad and other Arab capitals. In his 12-page letter, Saddam Hussein questioned the motives of any military attack, and although he acknowledged U.S. might, he questioned the use of it.
We ask again, America aiming the fire of its weapons on a specific target, harming it or destroying it with the support of the West, would it solve the problem?
The official newspapers, which had withheld comments since Tuesday, echoed the same line. As for Iraqis, the government wouldn't allow us to interview them. Iraqis blame the United States for their 10 years of suffering under UN sanctions. They also remember the loss of lives they suffered during the Gulf War.
The people we talked to off camera had conflicting feelings. On one hand, they were satisfied to see the American government under attack. On the other hand, they sympathized with the victims They told us they know very well what's it like to be one.
But mostly, they don't believe Iraq was involved and fear the United States will use the attacks as an excuse to hit Iraq. Many say with the unlimited support the U.S. has now, the United States won't have to show solid proof if it decides that Iraq has either lent a hand to the attackers or supported other terrorists. And that again, the Iraqi people will be under the fire of U.S. might. Rula Amin, CNN, Baghdad.
Well, with the threat of a U.S. retaliatory attack looming, large international humanitarian agencies have evacuated their staff from the Afghan capital, Kabul. Pakistan is bracing for an influx of Afghani refugees across their long shared border. Secretary of State Colin Powell says Pakistan has agreed to a list of requests from Washington that includes closing its border to Afghanistan, but that's a difficult task. Thousands of Afghanis who fled the Taliban rule are already living in squalid refugee camps inside Pakistan.
The heightened tensions place 8 international aid workers on trial in Afghanistan in an even more precarious situation. Sheila Cast reports.
24-year-old Heather Mercer was excited last spring about going to Afghanistan with a Christian aid group.
She was trying to think of ways that she could really blend into the culture, and she just really wanted to immerse herself in another culture.
But within 5 months, Mercer and 7 other Westerners were arrested, charged with trying to convert Muslims to Christianity, a very serious charge in Afghanistan. And then this happened.
To the extent that governments such as the Taliban government in Afghanistan support such things, you need to understand you cannot separate your activities from the activity of these perpetrators.
Afghanistan, where Mercer is on trial, is at the top of the potential target list for U.S. military retaliation because of Afghanistan's support for Osama bin Laden, the top suspect in the terror attacks. So on Thursday, U.S. and German diplomats pulled out of Afghanistan, along with United Nations and some Red Cross workers. There is no one from the U.S. there to continue negotiations about Mercer and the other American, Dana Curry. Even Heather's mother, Deborah Oddie, who had just arrived in Afghanistan on Tuesday, was forced to leave. Her head covered as required, she told reporters it was, quote, devastating to leave after just one visit with her daughter.
It sounds like she's in a dangerous situation as it is, and now with what's happened in the last week, that's heightened.
Everyone's prayer is that just God brings her through this safely. She's expelled from the country. That's our best hope.
To be expelled rather than forgotten as the United States decides the next step in its new war on terrorism. Sheila Cast for CNN, Washington.
Well, finally, as we conclude this hour's coverage, a group of New Yorkers congregated outside the city armory
to pray for those still missing after Tuesday's tragedy.